Y'all, my name is Kidus Gorfe, and my company is Change Solutions. There's actually a typo there, so it's Change Solutions. No, you're so good. But okay, cool. Change Solutions. There you go. All right, so I might tell you about 30 seconds about what we do, and then I can go into my story and how I got here. So Change Solutions is working on developing some software that works with restaurants, coffee shops, any food and beverage company, and effectively our goal is to produce a software that's both simple enough that anybody can use it, and also powerful enough that it can automate away a lot of the processes that go into running a restaurant or a coffee shop. So think stuff like inventory management, staffing, scheduling, handling call outs, and eventually we want to expand into vendor management and a bunch of other stuff. But the whole idea is we want to make it dead simple to run your restaurant beginning to end, especially for small and local operators, because my background, which I guess I can actually jump into the story, my background is in supply chain and logistics. So everything that I went to school and all my training was centered around how do you build optimal systems, especially for large companies. So think stuff like, how do you coordinate your vendors? How do you automate your trucking routes? How do you get everything to a point where it's working smoothly and you're saving as much money as possible by doing stuff efficiently? So once I graduated college, after working really hard in those 4 years, developing those skills, trying to figure out ways I could apply that to a big company, I actually ended up landing a job that I'd previously interned at a bank that y'all might have heard of. It's called Capital One, and I was working up in Dallas. And I was working there, but over the summer I had this cool idea, and it was about taking my training, taking my education, taking all the stuff that I had learned throughout school, and applying it to small and local business owners, because I talked to a few different people who own a few different types of businesses, a couple people in retail, a couple people who own restaurants and food and beverage companies, and they were telling me how their day-to-day operations were run off a spreadsheet, or they would order something whenever they ran out of stuff, or they'd end up in a situation where they were predicting what they'd sell today just by seeing how much they sold on the same day last year. And all of my training had kind of taught me that there was better ways to do these same things. So I started thinking, is there a way that I could take all that technology, take all that knowledge, and put it in a form that small business owners have access to? So that's when Change Solutions was founded, the summer after I graduated college, but I still plan to work my full-time job. So I went to Capital One. I worked there for give or take 10 months, and about 10 months into working at Capital One alongside working at Change, Capital One told me, hey, you kind of got to pick between either us or your startup. And I, being kind of young and foolish, I guess I decided, okay, let me go with the startup. What's the worst that could happen? And about a year later, I'm still at it, which is good to hear. And effectively, once I left my job, at the time I had a co-founder, but my co-founder is still working full-time. He actually started a master's program. So the original plan was he would do a lot of the development, and I'd do a lot of kind of like the business logic and building up our company. But ultimately, it kind of ended up with me becoming a developer and learning all the critical skills I needed to build the application that I kind of had in my mind. So effectively, after a little while, I ended up in the situation where a big chunk of our app had been built by me, a big chunk of my skill and my time had went into development and coding and all these sort of things. So I developed a whole new skill throughout this journey, which I'm excited to be utilizing now in a few different ways. But ultimately, at the beginning of this year, so January, and it's right around the time where I started popping out to these networking events, and I met so many wonderful people at the Innovation Hub, at the Chamber of Commerce. It was when I finally had a version of the app that I felt was ready to test. And I began talking to more and more business owners. So now I'm at the point where I talk to maybe 3 or 4 business owners a week, and I tell them about, hey, this is what we do, here's how we're trying to help, here are the different things that we're trying to build. And every time I have one of these conversations, it ends up at a point where I'm like, oh, I got to tear down this entire section of my app, or this thing that I thought, this theory that I had doesn't really pan out the way that I thought it would pan out. But it's really been such a wonderful experience to get to go out and talk to people and do all these things. And right around this time, actually, just about a month ago, my co-founder actually decided that they didn't have enough time for the company because, like I mentioned, they're doing a lot of other things. And they said, when it comes to my job, when it comes to the master's program that I'm in, that's really my top priority right now, and I don't feel like I can invest as much as I need to. So I ended up flying solo about a month ago. And ever since then, I've been, continually working. But it's kind of funny how life works out sometimes, because in that same time period, I've gotten a lot of really great opportunities to get my company in front of people and get the software that we're making in front of a lot of different people. And now I'm on course for, in about 3 weeks from now, I have the first paid version of our application coming out, which, it's polished, it's pretty, it can do all the things that I hoped to be able to do from, those 1.5, 2 years ago. And yeah, that kind of brings me to where I'm at now. So I'm, in front of you all presenting, talking about my company and the different things that I do. I definitely was a hard act to follow because the previous presenter was amazing. But I'm still so glad that I got to come up here and tell you all about, Change Solutions and all the stuff they got going on. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Questions. So I have one.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked a lot about how you've gotten in front of business owners
Yeah.
a couple at a time. Have you done anything with focus
No, that's a really great idea. And I guess like now that I actually have like a little group of people that I've met, that's actually wonderful thinking because you're right. Every time I talk to somebody, they have like a slightly different opinion, or maybe their background was in like working at a large chain, or they have their own local restaurant, all these things. So it's a bunch of different perspectives, and we're trying to build a software that generalizes. Having those perspectives kind of interact and figure out like what sticks and what doesn't stick might be super useful. So that's a great idea.
And you may get some people who will be like, oh, well, I don't think that's true about what the feedback you just
Exactly.
gave because here's my experience, and then they all start to think differently.
100%. Yeah.
And you provide value in that moment to them that's different than your software
Yeah. No, that.
by allowing them to just think outside the box.
No.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you so
And
much.
you did a great job presenting.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you have something I don't have. Youth.
Yeah.
If I was you, like at your age, you're killing it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're at the right stage in your life to be taking huge risks.
Yeah.
So I love young entrepreneurs. This is something I love supporting the most. I used to be one, believe it or not. There's two things. Ford said, and it's one of my favorite quotes, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they just said faster horses. Sometimes you have to change the paradigm.
Yeah.
You know, if your customers don't understand the value proposition, that's your job is to tell them, look,
Yeah.
this isn't the way you've been doing things forever, but that's because what you've been doing hasn't been working right. Here's
Yeah.
the new way to do it, and it's the best way.
100%.
So, I mean, that's just like unrequested advice, but sometimes that is what needs. You're probably too young, but, you know, when the Motorola Razr was around, that was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And then like next week, nobody could have thought about it other than maybe Steve Jobs. But then we got this thing called the iPhone.
Yeah.
And there was no going back to that flip phone. It looked like
Yeah.
it was just shoved in a drawer somewhere. So there's like these aha moments where the fundamental thing that we think is so important and so great, it just shifts and you can change that.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's what you're trying to do with your
Yeah, no, that's really amazing advice. I think if I look at really the core of what I'm trying to do and the idea behind it, I was looking at something like a Starbucks or McDonald's, right? And these companies don't have better products than a lot of the local business owners, you know. They don't have better service. People don't actually like being there as much as they'd like being at, you know, one of the coffee shops like, you know, Lit Java around the corner or, you know, any of the coffee shops in our area. But at the same time, they were still really dominating. So I was trying to think, there's a dissonance there. Like it doesn't make sense that one thing is so different from what you'd expect. And as I learned and I gained my education, I realized it's because these companies invest millions and millions of dollars into their data analysis teams, their inventory managers, these groups of people where their whole job is to help Starbucks make a better decision. So my idea was, how can I bring that same decision-making capability and that same level of automation to small and local operators? So that way they can individually succeed, but also as a collective, they can begin to succeed. Because if you look at like some of the failure rates, especially amongst like small restaurant owners, they're just chaotically high, and which is strange because every single person that you talk to, they say, oh, I love this local restaurant, I missed this place when they closed down during COVID. So it's about trying to find a way and trying to develop something that bridges that gap and makes it so your intuition begins to align more with what you're hearing from people and what you're hearing from the community. Yeah, 100%. Yeah?
If you have any coding issues or something that come up, just shoot me an email. I've been a software engineer for 30 years.
Okay, I definitely will. 'Cause like I mentioned, I've just gotten into this development thing, so I'm struggling. Every week I run into a coding issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were mentioning about how a lot of companies lose a lot of money specifically in like the management aspects. So
Yeah.
how does Change Solutions help those companies with mitigating those losses?
Okay, so if you look at some of the key places that people lose money in the food and beverage industry, one of the biggest things is food waste. Another big thing that you see is from not having enough inventory on hand, so which is going to be like you're understocked. So food waste, I think, is pretty intuitive. People can understand, okay, if you have too much food, stuff starts going bad, you lose money. That's obvious. But understocking is one of the bigger issues that I think my education began to reveal to me a little bit. If you miss out on that customer, right, and that customer would have spent $15 on this order, but you didn't have what they wanted, so they walk out the door, those $15 are all lost to you. So you might lose $3 in spoilage, but that $15 in loss might have a bigger impact to your bottom line that you can never see, that you can't really quantify. So the idea is making sure you're appropriately stocked, making sure you have enough on hand makes a big difference. Another big thing that I've been hearing from a lot of operators is with their scheduling. If you schedule one too many people, that can shoot the labor cost percentage through the roof, and you end up in this position where all the money you made during this little time period, the vast majority of it is going towards paying somebody who's kind of standing around not doing too much, which isn't great for them, it's not great for you, and it kind of puts you in a tough situation. So the idea though is there are systems in place that address these issues, and there are systems in place and algorithms in place that can help you find the answer for like how do I do these things as optimally as possible. So it's about how do you distill that knowledge down into the simplest possible form so that way small and local business owners don't have to learn how to use this new complicated tool. They don't have to become an inventory manager. Instead, they can just hop onto Chain Solutions and have those components of their company optimized so they can focus on the stuff that makes them special, you know, like their food, their service, all the things that kind of go into making their place unique. Yeah?
Okay, so you said you're about to have your first paid version.
Yeah.
Right? And so let's just assume that it's people are gonna bite, right? They're excited about it.
Yeah.
And in 6 months, you've got a whole bunch of people. What's your plan to scale?
Okay.
What have you done to kind of invest in that?
Okay, so actually, with running this company, almost counterintuitively, my planning horizon has shrunk every single like month as I move on. Because before it was like I have this plan for a year out, and things are going to lay out this way, and I know where all the dominoes are going to fall. And the more that I learn, the more that I begin to understand. I realize beyond maybe a month or two, everything is so variable. There's so many different ways things can go. The technology can change, the landscape can change. So to me, really like the goal behind scaling and the way that I want to approach it, because I actually had previous experience working at a different startup, and they were really centered around how do we raise as much money as possible? How do we go down the venture capital route and make a whole lot of money and kind of like blow it up overnight, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but to me, I didn't really like that business model, and I feel like it kind of took a little bit away from the core of what they were trying to do, and I didn't want to kind of go through that with change, especially because, you know, as y'all could probably tell, this is my baby. I've been working on it for such a long time, and I care about it so much. So I want to instead expand through like local groups and local organizations. So Chambers of Commerce is a really great example. Like going from town to town, going to chamber meetings, meeting the people in the community, understanding who do people listen to and who do people really trust, and convincing them, hey, I have something here that's genuinely helpful. It's going to cost less than whatever you're already doing. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. Going to the restaurants, going to all these places, walking in the front door and being like, hey, good to meet you. This is what we do. This is our background. This is why we think we can help you. So trying to do things in kind of like a grassroots way, which not only hopefully will save a whole bunch of money on marketing, but at the same time will also allow me to interface with people and allow all the people that I work with to interface with people in a way that we can better understand their needs and potentially modify whatever we're doing to fit every person individually, instead of kind of having this blanket thing and it's like, you know, if you're not happy with it, just take it. So it's kind of, that's as clear as I have it right now. I know the first thing I want to do is bring on a sales professional and another developer, because like I mentioned, my background isn't in development, so having a dedicated developer, and that's really what they love to do and what they really understand how to do, and I can kind of show them how I've gotten to the point that I'm at, and they can kind of take over that aspect of it. And then another sales professional who that's really their passion, that's really what they do. So that way, instead of me not being too great at two things, I have two people who are really great at both of the things that they do, and then I can look for different ways to expand or change our technology, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
My family has a Caribbean restaurant in Columbus, Georgia. And
Okay.
so where the restaurant is located, we found that the lunch rush, or what we were expecting the lunch rush, wasn't manifesting. But the weekends were great, right?
Yeah.
Caribbean restaurant on the weekend, music, blah, blah, blah. It is great. So what my cousin did was he got a food truck. And then he would take the food truck, put the two employees that would usually be there during the lunch rush, and put them in locations where, you know, there's a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah.
And the revenue from the food truck made up the loss that they were realizing by the lull in the rush hour. So
See?
do you have plans to like think outside of the box, or can your app account for solutions like that?
Well, first of all, that's really impressive. I think that from my conversation, one thing I realized, like the operators that are willing to be creative and find solutions to some problems that everybody else just kind of thinks that they have to live with are usually the ones who are doing very well. So that's really impressive for your family, first of all. But second of all, the way the software is developed, right, is effectively you have a series of tools. You have this bundle of tools that all come together, right? And then we have one integrated layer that kind of functions like if y'all have used ChatGPT or Claude or something, the one integrated layer that connects with all of these tools. And it can interact with things in different ways, and it can utilize the tools in different combinations, different variations. So it gives us a lot of flexibility in the way that we're developing the technology, and it gives us a lot of different avenues that we potentially explore. So in terms of being able to come up with that solution in particular, that seems like a little bit unique. That seems like something where you'd really have to be there and you really have to understand to know. But one thing that the technology kind of can do, especially at scale, is the more and more local operators that you get on here, you build up this network of data. So if you have 10 restaurants that are using compared to 1,000 restaurants, you can begin to get a better idea of what foot traffic in this area as a whole looks like and what patterns in this area as a whole look like. And all of a sudden, the predictive analytics within the software become more powerful for every single restaurant on the chain. So you can look at one thing like Starbucks is a great example. They have a location on every corner. So they have a better understanding of what coffee demand dynamics look like inside the city than any individual location would. So by unifying all of these different coffee shops, all these different restaurants who have local operators who are run independently, you can begin to get a better idea of what the demand picture looks like as a whole, and you can help every individual location make better decisions with that greater picture in mind.
That's interesting because it sounds like your application eventually is going to be able to help people predict where to locate before they
Yeah,
even open
100%.
and have data for expansion, like understanding, hey, when should I expand? Where are the ideal locations to put the next?
Exactly. That's actually one thing I'm experimenting with because I haven't solidified the pricing model yet. I'm still considering a couple things. But one of the biggest things is I would love it if you have one location and you're doing less than X amount of revenue, I would love to give it away for free just because of the fact that you're still a small operator. You don't have the resources, you have a bunch of other things pulling from you, and instead I want it to be a product that grows with you. So if you're familiar with a lot of those platforms where the more you use it is the more that you scale. So the more revenue, the more transaction that we have to process, that's what your cost is based on as compared to it being there's this fixed fee and if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So I am trying to think of different ways to implement that. I'm trying to think of a way to make it simple enough where it makes sense. But the idea is I want Chain Solutions to be, if you want to start up a restaurant, it's the first thing that you get and it helps you set everything up. And then if you grow it to 1,000 locations, we can still help you operate the entire value chain without missing a beat. So that's kind of, that's long-term vision. But that's, like I said, I don't have more than 2 months ahead of me planned. So I'm still working on that. Yeah. Cool.
You had a question, Ricardo?
Yeah, what difficulties, if any, have you run into so far?
Okay, a whole bunch of difficulty. Okay, the first thing is it was not part of my plan to become a developer because, like I mentioned, I have a co-founder and me and him have been friends since ninth grade or something, and he's all in on software. He's a software engineer by trade. He really has that skill set, and I didn't. But then, as we started working on the company over the course of the first couple of months, I realized, okay, the rate of things that I want to see things developed at, my co-founder can't do just because of his various other responsibilities. So I began saying, okay, let me just pick up this one little thing, let me pick up this other little thing. And eventually over time it turned into me becoming a full-fledged developer for our application. So I never saw that coming and I never saw the different challenges that would come with trying to understand how to use these different tools and how to write code in this way and trying to be efficient in a process that I really didn't have a background in. Another big challenge is getting in front of small business owners because as a lot of y'all know, because I know a lot of y'all are small business owners, people try to sell you stuff all the time and people try to make a quick buck off you all the time. So being able to actually get into a room with people and have them trust you enough to at least have a conversation, to sit down, take that 10, 15 minutes and potentially give you advice, give you critique, even look at what you're building is very difficult. So being able to build up that trust amongst the community, being able to build up that trust amongst the people that I want to help with our software, that's been another big challenge. And then a third thing is social media is just an absolute headache for me because that's not my experience. I don't really use it too much in my personal life, but I understand how important it is. So I've been trying to keep up with that and post regularly and do all of these things, but I swear I'll spend 2 hours on a post and it just doesn't look good at all and I'm just putting it up there for 3 people to see. So it's been a bit of a strange feeling, but I'm chipping away at it. The hope is eventually, the challenges will begin to lessen and lessen, and then I'll be able to bring on people who are really gifted at these different components of running a business. So that way, I can focus on what our next steps are instead of trying to operate everything all at once. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
Any other questions? We have about 30 seconds left for questions.
Cool.
Any
All
last
good to go.
questions? No? Okay.
I just want to say he's refreshingly weird. I mean that in a good way. Because as a young man standing up there going, I'm not really into social media, you're like, what?
All right, so I'll take that. And we do have one last question for you. So how can we as a community help you?
Okay, 2 big things. First of all, this one's probably pretty obvious by now. If you know anybody who owns any restaurant, operates a restaurant, if you know anybody who works there as a bartender, definitely, I've already talked to Randy before. Yeah, but if you know anybody in that space at all, I would love to have a conversation with them. I'm at the point where I probably do 3 or 4 conversations with different operators throughout the week, and every single conversation, I learn so much. Where it's either like they tell me something, they're like, "Oh, it'd be cool if somebody could do this," and I'm like, "Oh, look, we already have it," or I'm like, "I never even thought that could potentially be an issue. I need to build something around it." So every one of those conversations helps, and like kind of getting our app in front of people, seeing if we can get our first few paid customers like pre-registered before the launch. That'd be really great. And then another big thing is a big part of the way that I've been funding all this and keeping it all going is by using my newfound development skills to build websites, mobile applications, anything. So if y'all ever need anything built, y'all ever need anything for your own companies, I'm more than happy to see if I can put something together for you, or if I can't do it, I'll definitely find you somebody that can. So that's kind of, oh, yeah.
Does it need to be local restaurants?
No, not necessarily. It could be anywhere in America. Like, I'm happy to talk with anyone. Because like I said, we have like a software product, so you can access it from, I don't even know if it's just limited to America. It might be anywhere on earth. We can, get in front of people. So, yeah, cool.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank y'all. I appreciate it.